As you no doubt noticed, the recording for the fifth session of Khaotic had no video. As it turns out, it did. I mean, I recorded the screen. We played by screen, watching each other, all completely live action, etc., as normal. But the recording itself, well, the visual was just a bunch of choppy, frozen thingies, and the sounds was borked in some way. It got more and more and more garbled, and finally, by the point that I cut it off, you could probably hear that it was getting unusable. That wasn't happening during play. We were all talking fine. So only when looking at the recording did I realize how messed up it was. Well, anyway, I'm still working on that part. I'm adding graphics to show where everybody went, because this whole session had to do with people running around the IC's complex, which is fine. But where it cut off, you might get the wrong impression that everybody just sort of moved around and walked and talked, right? This was a walk and talk episode. No, it wasn't. The activist that was being questioned in J.J. Deerfield's office had a device with him that they had taken away, and the characters had just figured that out at the point that that basically I said this recording is no longer usable. You should have seen Emma's face. Her character wasn't in the scene, but she was paying very close attention to what this guy was saying. And when they started talking about the nature of this strange, technological device that had no explosives and had no power source and looked kind of like a transmitter, but there was nothing transmitting. And, what is that? And she was just like, oh no, right? She had, gone through all the intel and everything from Xenos and had memorized a whole ton of it. And Emma, or rather Nadia had, and Emma had paid very close attention. She was like, I know exactly what that is. We're screwed. And sure enough, right when Wanda Welcome, lets loose on Edmund Brackenberry out there in the field about how it's time for you to meet our alien friends face to face, peacefully, no weapons, everybody's unprotected. It's all going to be great because we're all, vulnerable to one another, in our what could be safer than all of us being equally vulnerable. That's going to be wonderful, right? It's time for this. And of course, that's when, the locker, they're right when the characters are saying in the office are saying, where is it? And he's like, over there in that cabinet. And the cabinet bursts open, of course, and this thing comes out. Okay, this is a really good example of what I'm talking about with my interface with the rules and the text, because in the text there's a little adventure about a bunch of rampaging spawn in the IC's headquarters, and between you and me, you can read it yourself. I don't think it's a really effective play device as a written scenario. So instead, I adapted it, right? So we got the whole Wanda Welcome interface thing going on, and I hooked those concepts together, and I took a look at the little creature and said, I'm going to change it up a little bit. But the basic idea is fine, right? There's a running battle, in the IC's headquarters. Well, things proceed quite quickly. We've got Claire in the cafeteria talking with Danielle. We've got Margaret and Albert in the security office. And we've also got Nyansu in the communications area. And we've got, who do we have left? Oh, yes. And Nadia has gone downstairs and is currently, completely flummoxed. I mean, through a series of bad rolls, is just completely unable to get decent intelligence out of the archives after having sneaked her way in there incredibly competently. I'm just sort of amused at her. Like, she's in total geek fest, not intel oriented record keeping, and that's the way I'm interpreting her really shitty role. And she's just like, I cannot figure this out. Well, anyway, but she, of course, goes to where she is interested in, which is where the psychotronic weaponry is being researched. And so she goes in there and she's going to hook up with a whole bunch of cool weaponry. So anyway, aside from Nadia and Claire, the other three are actually quite close together And Yansu is quick to get to the security office because he can hear all the mayhem. Now, what ensues in there is quite interesting. I'm running it quite by the rules, and we rolled an order for the actions, and then a series of interesting rolls occurred in which J.J. Deerfield, the only one who's armed off the cuff, actually is quite ineffective against this hopping, whip-tailed thing. They had a thing called a scorpion that has a tail, and I sort of adapted into sort of more of a kangaroo rat whip-tail kind of thing. That's probably a really crappy image to give you at the moment, but it was very non-mammalian thing, and with cybertech spikes sticking out all over it. Obviously had been engineered as well. And so anyway, to make a long story short, it was our player characters who really, really carried the day. And I mean really carried the day. The thing, let's see, Nyansu figures out that it's, he wants to know what kind of weaknesses it might have, and he rolls really well. And so I'm talking about some of the things that they actually say in the book, in their monster, about the things that it's not so good at. And I'm like, I picked up on that. And they figured that they could probably, disorient it. I mean, and with differing kinds of sensory input that are suited to its limited sensory range. And so so Nyansu is telling everybody about this in a timely way, and Margaret gets to the microphone that J.J. Deerfield uses to talk to the security complex, makes her mechanical communications roll, and shorts it out so that this horrible feedback is blanketing the room, and it's exactly what this creature does not need. So that means they've got massive column shifts, a whole bunch of different column shifts for different reasons on how they can get better rolls on this thing. Albert, interestingly enough, of course the place is full of weapons, right? In fact, it's even got a list in there of what kind of weapons are in the security office. And so he seizes the most classic rifle. And everybody's like, Albert, rifle? Nathan just is kind of smiling quietly to himself because Albert is a gun nut. And, fascinated by weaponry is one of his background rolled things. And so he says, and that's why he took big skills on rifles. And he's just like, this one. Stands up, classic hunting stance, right? This lanky academic, classic hunting stance with his rifle, and just puts a bullet right through the thing's most vulnerable spot with a massive attack and just nails it. By the rules, drops it in its tracks, but even better, doesn't quite kill it. And even better, because again, working with the hybrid concept of what they offer in the rules and what I'm doing with it, one of the things I'm preserving from the written scenario is a capability of this creature that they know nothing about. And the fact that it is not dead yet actually is very significant. And so everybody right now is saying, wow, that was one shot, took it down. That's amazing. Of course, it was with everybody's help in this way. But not just down there with those psychotronic weapons. And she might need those, is all I have to say. So I'm really enjoying this. The different interactions that put everybody in different places, the different kinds of personalities that we saw, the different different details of different kinds that all came together right into that combat situation. And the fact that the system actually kind of, helped us, buoyed us with what anybody wanted to do, and the information that they could work with, and the nature of their characters, which I thought was quite cool. Nyansu basically, even in the thick of combat, and this thing's edged whipping tail, nailing the activist who had actually brought it here, so he dies like right in front of them in this gruesome way. I mean, they just all went into total, hardcore mode. And the fact that I rolled badly for Deerfield, who's a good fighter, the good shot and everything, but I rolled really badly, meant that it really led the player characters to be, on the critical edge. Went through a couple of rounds, right, as they're like orienting themselves, trying to get out of the way and trying to find cover and trying to do the right thing, grab the gun, everybody is maneuvering around while this thing is, striking and stalking, and it it actually was a really nice bit. Um, Meanwhile, things are still happening around and about the complex, right? We've still got the activists out in front. We've still got Brackenberry out there. Um, Overreaction of the security staff to the confused things that they're hearing from inside. Um, all sorts of things can go very, very differently at this point, and I'm quite looking forward to how that's running. All right, so that's what turned out. It ended up in a huge, fairly quick to play dust up. There was no more than maybe 25 minutes left of play from where it left off in the recording, and it was efficiently and brutally conducted, and everybody, just jumped in with both feet with everything happening. So it was a real nice come together of us as players too. We're a lot of this game involves sneaking and spying, and well, what am I going to do? A lot of time to think about it, or a lot of considerations to take into account. And here, much more straightforward situation, much more, um, much more visceral in terms of your immediate decision. And it was nice to see this group has that really wide range of interaction, ideas, tactics, and differing priorities. So quite cool.